serving the Republic of the Philippines for more than 75 years. Ito po ang Presidential Broadcast Service.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day, this is Dateline Malacañang, and here are the news. On the top story, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. enumerated the outcomes of his two-day state visit to the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. In his arrival statement early Wednesday morning, the president discussed his meetings with Vietnamese President Vo Van Thuong, Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh, and Chairman of the National Assembly, Vuong Dinh Hue. President Marcos Jr. said his visit further strengthened the Philippines' strategic partnership with Vietnam, the country's only strategic partner in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN region. Let us listen to the arrival statement of Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Magandang umaga po. I am pleased to inform you and the Filipino people of the outcomes of the state visit to the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. The state visit aimed to further strengthen our strategic partnership with Vietnam, Vietnam being our only strategic partner in ASEAN, and further to explore areas of cooperation while building on existing ones. I met with His Excellency Vo Van Thuong, President of Vietnam, and we discussed areas of cooperation including defense, maritime, trade and investment, economic, education, tourism, and culture. We also witnessed the exchange of several agreements, including on rice, agriculture, culture, and maritime cooperation. I also met with other leaders of Vietnam, the Prime Minister of Vietnam and the Chairman of Vietnam's National Assembly. We discussed the strengthening of bilateral relations through people-to-people exchanges, parliamentary cooperation, and many other areas of collaboration. On trade and investment, we have successfully safeguarded the interests of Filipino businesses operating in Vietnam by providing them with a platform to voice their experiences, plans, and challenges at the very highest level. We want to assure them that the Philippine government stands ready to support their endeavors in competing in foreign markets. In my dialogue with Vietnamese business leaders, they expressed interest in expanding their businesses in the Philippines, as well as exploring cooperation with our business sector in various traditional and non-traditional economic activities. Furthermore, we have engaged in discussions with the Vingroup company to explore a collaboration in the fields of AI, medical courses, and scholarships for Filipino students. Our shared objectives include active participation in the electric vehicle and battery supply chains. I had the pleasure, of course, to speak with the Filipinos living in Vietnam, and I expressed my appreciation for their continued good work in projecting a very positive image of the Philippines in Vietnam. I acknowledge the sacrifice that they have made from their families, and I lauded them for the contributions to the socio-economic development of the Philippines and of Vietnam. I gave them my assurances that my administration will continue to strive for the betterment of all Filipinos in the Philippines and abroad.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. and Vietnamese President Vo Van Thuong on Tuesday convened for a bilateral meeting to bolster relations centered on key areas such as maritime cooperation, defense, trade, agriculture, and culture. During their talks, both leaders agreed to further strengthen and develop their strategic partnership ahead of its 10th anniversary in 2025 and the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations in 2026. The Philippine President and Vietnamese President agreed to deepen economic relations and encourage joint initiatives between the two countries. They emphasized the importance of increasing the volume of two-way trade and investment, including through leveraging on the Association of Southeast Asian Nations or ASEAN Trade and Goods Agreement or ATIGA and the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership or RCEP in promoting more integrated supply chains among companies from the two economies. Both sides agreed to work closely on creating favorable conditions for smooth trade flows in order to achieve the trade target of $10 billion at the earliest, as well as enhancing the business environment to make it more conducive to investment in sectors of interest to both countries. The two presidents also discussed cooperation in areas such as agriculture, particularly in rice trading, market access for agricultural products, food security, energy security, infrastructure development, education, transportation management, innovation, tourism, connectivity, science and technology, and environmental protection, among others. The leaders emphasized the importance of enhancing cooperation in education, culture, tourism, healthcare, people-to-people exchanges, cooperation between localities, and promoting the role of each other's friendship organizations in order to strengthen their people's bond, increase mutual understanding, boost connectivity, enrich cultural diversity, and promote the overall relations. They also agreed to strengthen existing maritime cooperation mechanisms, notably the Joint Commission on Maritime and Ocean Affairs at the Deputy Minister level, the hotline communication mechanism between Coast Guard authorities of both countries, among others, and to adopt other measures to ensure the safety and security of fishermen from both countries, as well as to solve amicably the unexpected incidents at sea. President Marcos Jr. and President Tuong emphasized the importance of maintaining peace, stability, maritime security, safety, and freedom of navigation in and overflight above the South China Sea. They called for the exercise of self-restraint in the conduct of activities that would implicate or escalate disputes and affect regional peace and stability, and avoidance of unilateral acts that can change the status quo and increase tensions, as well as the peaceful settlements of disputes without resorting to the threat or use of force in accordance with the international law, particularly the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea or UNCLOS. They reaffirmed their commitment to ensuring the full and effective implementation of the 2002 ASEAN-China Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea or DOC in its entirety, and working towards the early conclusion of an effective and substantive Code of Conduct or COC in the South China Sea that is in accordance with international law, particularly the 1982 UNCLOS. In this regard, they urge the promotion of an environment that is conducive to the COC negotiations.
Dateline Malacañang.
President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. and Vietnam President Vo Van Tuong on Tuesday witnessed the exchange of bilateral documents in various fields, including rice trade cooperation, incident prevention and management in the South China Sea, agriculture, and the cultural cooperation. Among those signed include the Memorandum of Understanding or MOU on Rice Trade Cooperation, Understanding on Incident Prevention and Management in the South China Sea or SCS, MOU on Cooperation in Agriculture and Related Fields, MOU between the Philippine Coast Guard or PCG and the Vietnam Coast Guard or VCG on Maritime Cooperation, and Cultural Cooperation Program between the National Commission for Culture and the Arts or NCCA of the Republic of the Philippines and the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam for the period of 2024 to 2029. The Philippine Presidential Communications Office or PCO said that the MOU on rice trade cooperation will create a rice cooperation framework for both countries to ensure a stable food supply amid the impact of calamities, natural disasters, climate change, among others. Under the MOU, Vietnam agreed to supply the Philippines through both parties' private sector with white rice amounting to 1.5 million to 2 million metric tons or MT per year until 2028 at a competitive and affordable price. On incident prevention and management in the SCS, both nations agreed to enhance coordination regarding maritime issues bilaterally within the Association of Southeast Asian Nations or ASEAN and with other dialogue partners. The Philippines and Vietnam also agreed to intensify efforts in promoting trust, confidence, and understanding through dialogue and cooperative activities. The MOU on cooperation in agriculture and related fields, meanwhile, will intensify the collaboration of the two nations in the fields of agriculture, rural development, and other related fields, as well as establish 19 areas of cooperation including high-value crops, livestock and aquaculture, farm management and sustainability, smart agriculture and aquaculture technology, research trainings and exchanges of experts. Meantime, the MOU on maritime cooperation is aimed at strengthening the understanding, mutual trust, and confidence between the two parties through the development of a joint Coast Guard committee to discuss common issues and interests between the PCG and VCG, including measures to ensure the safety and security of fishermen from both countries. A hotline mechanism will be established between the PCG and VCG to facilitate the communication. The Philippines and Vietnam also agreed to expand its cultural exchanges and strengthen friendly relations through the Cultural Cooperation Program in accordance with the cultural agreement signed between the two nations in 1998.
Dateline Malacañang.
President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. on Tuesday reaffirmed the country's position to settle the territorial disputes in the South China Sea, or SCS, in a peaceful manner. The Philippine president said this during his separate meetings with Vietnamese President Vo Van Thuong and Vietnamese Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh in Hanoi. President Marcos said the Philippines wants to address these issues with China and all other claimants through peaceful dialogue and consultations. The chief executive, however, expressed dismay China's unilateral and illegal actions that violate the Philippines' sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdiction and exacerbate tensions in the SCS. Despite China's aggressive actions involving Chinese and Philippine vessels, President Marcos Jr. said the Philippines' stance on the SCS has been consistent, clear, and firmly anchored in the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS. President Marcos said the Philippines is committed to work with other like-minded states to ensure a rules-based international order in the Asia-Pacific region governed by international law. The president also expressed support for Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, centrality and the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific as the foremost regional framework and as the architecture for collective peace, stability, and prosperity.
Dateline Malacañang.
President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. is in constant communication with lawmakers and legal luminaries to get their insights on the proposed reforms to the Constitution. In a media interview on the sidelines of his state visit to Vietnam on Tuesday, President Marcos said he had consulted Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin and Chief Presidential Legal Counsel Juan Ponce Enrile to determine the best thing to do when it comes to amending the 1987 Constitution. President Marcos said he could not say if PI was still one of the options that remain. He added that he has been talking to the top leaders of the Senate and the House of Representatives in the past few days to resolve their differing views on PI. President Marcos said the usual conflict between the House of Representatives and the Senate is whether to vote together or separately. He said he had asked congressional leaders and some of the best constitutional minds to come up with a simpler solution that would not stir controversy. President Marcos earlier said it is the job of the Commission on Elections, or COMELEC, to look into reports of alleged buying out of signatures for a PI for amending the charter. On January 26, Social Economic Planning Secretary Arsenio Balisacan said unnecessary restrictions in the economic provision of the Constitution should be eliminated to entice more foreign investors. The following day, Albay 2nd District Representative Joey Salceda agreed with Balisacan, saying constitutional amendments are crucial in boosting investors' confidence in the country.
Dateline Malacañang.
The relationship between Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. and Vice President Sara Duterte remains the same. This was emphasized by President Marcos despite the negative statements released by some members of the Vice President's family against the President. In a media interview in Hanoi, Vietnam, the chief executive said his relationship with Vice President Duterte has not changed, especially since the Vice President did not say anything against him. President Marcos Jr. also emphasized that Vice President Duterte will remain the Secretary of the Department of Education, or DepEd, under his administration despite the conflict between the Dutertes and Marcos. The Philippine president said the Uniteam Party still remains, especially since the Uniteam is a unification of all the political forces in the Philippines that have come together for the good of the country.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Philippine Information Agency, or PIA, the Presidential Broadcast Service, Bureau of Broadcast Services, or PBS-BBS, and the Philippine News Agency, or PNA, extended their appreciation to United Nations Special Rapporteur Irene Khan for engaging in a frank and insightful discussion. In a meeting with Khan at the PIA building in Quezon City, the three media agencies underscored their commitment to address the underlying causes of misinformation and disinformation, especially at this time since they are about to embark on the nationwide rollout of the government's media and information literacy campaign this year. The agencies collectively aim to overcome challenges and foster trust among the public by upholding the principles of transparency and good governance. They assured the special rapporteur of their unwavering advocacy for the people's right to information and the preservation of freedom of expression and opinion. The three government agencies also looked forward to the continued collaboration with the United Nations and other stakeholders and assured that information released to the public will be accurate, relevant, and timely.
Dateline Malacañang.
Engaged in a bilateral meeting with the United States Department of State Undersecretary for Economic Growth, Energy and Environment Jose Fernandez to discuss areas for strategic partnerships. In a statement, the Finance Department said Fernandez highlighted specific areas of interest for the U.S., particularly critical minerals, semiconductors, and energy security. Secretary Recto, on the other hand, expressed the country's willingness to collaborate on the said areas. He also urged the U.S. to strengthen its trade partnership with the Philippines, to diversify supply chains and enhance economic resilience. Recto assured the public that the Philippine government will address investor concerns such as high electricity costs through initiatives like the proposed amendments to the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act and other streamlined processes to ease the conduct of business in the country. Joining Fernandez were U.S. Ambassador to the Philippines Mary Kay Carlson, U.S. State Department Special Assistants Laura Russ and C.J. Johnson, and key officials from the U.S. Embassy in Manila.
Dateline Malacañang.
Social Welfare and Development, or DSWD, and the United Nations Population Fund, or UNFPA, Philippines signed an agreement to strengthen collaboration in empowering young girls and adult women, especially those from the most vulnerable populations. The agreement is contained in a Memorandum of Understanding or MOU for 5 years, which ensures gender equality and better access to service for young girls and adult women. UNFPA Philippine Country Representative Dr. Laila Judane during the signing said they are proud to partner with DSWD, a government agency at the forefront of social protection and women and girls empowerment. Judane said they can now reach the most vulnerable and provide critical support and services in the fight against gender-based violence and harmful gender norms. The MOU outlines a framework for cooperation in 5 areas: generating data to inform programming, strengthening the DSWD's role in emergencies, supporting the implementation of programs related to gender-based violence or GBV, enhancing service delivery systems and referral pathways for GBV survivors, and addressing discriminatory gender norms or practices through the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino programs or 4Ps. The SWD Secretary Rex Gatchalian gratefully expressed his full support to the agency's partnership with the UNFPA Philippines. UNFPA committed to work hand in hand with the government in strengthening and convening agencies and civil society organizations to jointly and comprehensively work on the prevention and response to GBV through the humanitarian development continuum. This involves supporting the SWD as its co-lead of the GBV subcluster, a coordination mechanism composed of government agencies and civil society organizations engaged in addressing GBV in emergency situations, according to the UNFPA. Meanwhile, UNFPA sees the DSWD's wide reach and positive impact on behavior through its flagship programs like the 4Ps as a great opportunity to promote gender equality and address harmful norms in households and communities. The signed MOU is seen as a significant development in the country's efforts to achieve its commitments for the International Conference on Population and Development or ICPD Plan of Action and the Sustainable Development Goals or SDGs, particularly SDG 5 on gender equality and SDG 10 on reduced inequalities.
Dateline Malacañang.
The National Council for Solo Parents or NCSP said it will conduct a pilot implementation of its Strengthening Opportunities for Lone Parents or SOLO program to address the psychological and emotional challenges associated with single parenting. In a Bagong Pilipinas briefing, NCSP Secretary General Red de Guzman said the SOLO program aims to aid single-parent families handle social and psychological difficulties. De Guzman said the focus should not only be on problems of financial nature but also the psychological effects of being a single parent. The pilot implementation will be launched in Anda, Pangasinan, Lapu-Lapu City in Cebu Province, and Parabo City, Davao del Norte this year. De Guzman said the Department of Social Welfare and Development is targeting a nationwide implementation of the SOLO program by 2025. De Guzman said he had a discussion with Department of the Interior and Local Government Assistant Secretary Elizabeth De Leon regarding the conduct of town hall meetings to disseminate the programs and projects of the government for solo parents. Republic Act 11861 or the Expanded Solo Parents Welfare Act covers 6 categories of solo parents.
Dateline Malacañang.
Statistics Authority or PSA revised upward the third quarter Philippine economic growth to 6.0% from 5.9%. In a statement, the PSA said major contributors to the upward revision in the gross domestic product or GDP growth were manufacturing, which grew by 1.8%, up than the earlier 1.7% growth financial and insurance activities from 9.5% to 9.6%, and accommodation and food service activities from 20% to 21%. The growth rate of the gross national income in the third quarter of 2023 was maintained at 12.1% annually. The annual growth of the net primary income from the rest of the world, on the other hand, was revised downward from 112.5% to 111.6%. Official fourth quarter and full year 2023 Philippine economic growth will be released on Wednesday. In a separate report, the PSA said that the total value of agriculture and fisheries production slightly went up last year. The PSA said the value of production in agriculture and fisheries at constant 2018 prices amounted to 1.76 trillion pesos, higher by 0.4% than the 1.75 trillion pesos in 2022. The value of crops production, which amounted to 1 trillion Philippine peso, also grew by 0.7% from 994 billion pesos. Livestock production likewise grew by 2.4% to 263.3 billion pesos, while the value of poultry production also went up by 3.8% to 262 billion Philippine peso. The PSA, however, recorded a decline in the value of fisheries production from 252 billion pesos in 2022 to 236 billion pesos in 2023.
Dateline Malacañang.
Economic Zone Authority or PEZA and the Bureau of Corrections or BUCOR signed an agreement to establish economic zones on portions of land under BUCOR. The Memorandum of Understanding or MOU signed by PEZA Director General Tereso Panga and BUCOR Director General Gregorio Pio Catapang Jr. is a co-development and revenue sharing scheme, according to a news release. BUCOR will prepare the documentary requirements for the issuance of a presidential proclamation for the establishment and development of economic zones. It shall determine and provide an inventory of idle BUCOR lands that are viable for development of economic zones such as agroforestry eco-zones, defense industrial complex, and mineral processing eco-zones. PEZA will facilitate the registration of identified and proposed lands under BUCOR. Catapang said the agency has more than 32,000 hectares of available land for possible eco-zone development. Of the total, 25,000 hectares are in Iwahig, Palawan, 7,000 hectares in Sablayan, Mindoro, and 300 hectares at the new Bilibid Prison Compound in Muntinlupa. In terms of hiring workers, Catapang said persons deprived of their liberty will be prioritized. Panga urged investors to locate in the Mega Eco Zone project, which will be located in Palawan.
Dateline Malacañang.
For Dateline Malacañang, the Philippines is one of the 7 countries that the U.S. will be partnering with to diversify its semiconductor supply chain under the CHIPS and Science Act, according to visiting United States Under Secretary for Economic Growth and Energy and the Environment, Jose Fernandez. Fernandez told reporters that the Philippines, along with Vietnam, Panama, Puerto Rico, and Mexico, will receive funding from the U.S. government to make the ecosystem of their local semiconductor industry more conducive to U.S. investors. He said the U.S. government has earmarked $500 million for the International Technology, Security, and Innovation or ITSI fund to be spent over the next 5 years in the partner countries. Fernandez said the U.S. will soon receive recommendations from Paris-based Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development or OECD on how the U.S. can help in strengthening the semiconductor sector in the Philippines. Electronics and semiconductor products are the Philippines' top merchandise export, sharing more than half of the country's total export revenues. The industry generated up to 2.5 million direct and indirect jobs. Fernandez noted that 60% of the total investments in the semiconductor sector came from U.S. companies. Signed by U.S. President Joe Biden on August 9, 2022, the CHIPS and Science Act authorizes investments in exploratory and translational research that will advance the most innovative ideas across all areas of science and engineering.
Dateline Malacañang.
That is all for today's Dateline Malacañang for Radyo Pilipinas World Service. This has been Bea Gaza.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila. Dateline Malacañang.